Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Piotr Maniawski. I'm responsible for clinical science at the molecular imaging business at Philips Healthcare. And I would like to thank the organizers of the BRAIN workshop to invite me to talk about the product development in 2021. In particular, I would like to thank Dr. George Zubel, who about 30 years ago convinced me to move from academia to industry, and I never looked back. So thank you, George. Let's start this short presentation. I wanted to start with the clinical image. What you see here is an illustration of the progress that both academia and the industry made in brain PET imaging. Image on the left is one of the very first coincidence brain images. The image on the top of the slide is the image with conventional time-of-flight PET-CT system. And the same patient was imaged on the bottom with the digital photon counting Varios PET-CT system from Philips. You can obviously appreciate the differences in generations of PET scanners, and to me, that's one of the examples of successful evolution of PET technology, that a combination of collaboration with academia and industry brought to the market and was able to deliver to different hospitals in the world. Today, I wanted to go through the concept or the process of idea to product, and I will concentrate on two main phases of that development, the advanced development and new product industrialization. We start with ideas that can be generated by looking at clinical market trends, technology trends. We participate in many trade shows and scientific meetings. We also look at scientists at Philips, and particularly at Philips Research, to look at individual contributor different initiatives. Then we scale these ideas down with portfolio management activities, and the activities that are selected are a part of advanced development, which I will talk about in a moment. So the advanced development process is subdivided into several phases. The idea is to maximize the exploration of solution space rather than looking at specific solution or technology, and deliberately diverging and converging to prevent that jump to a single solution. So that's why you see this relatively complex graph on the bottom that allows us, the whole process allows us to have checks and balances to look at the value of the proposition, the concept, the proof that the concept works, and developing the functionality to be able to move that from the phase of advanced development into the industrialization phase. I will use two specific examples of that. The first one is the development of the Varios digital photon counting PET-CT system. You see the picture of the complete commercial system on the right, but before that system was delivered to the market, we had two different prototypes. The prototype on the top is illustrated by the picture of the actual system installed at the University Hospital's Case Medical Center in Cleveland, Ohio, which consists of the standard PET-CT Gemini TF system and a digital photon counting detector ring that can be put in between the CT gantry and PET gantry of the Gemini TF. That resulted in the world's first and only, and probably the last, PET CT system with two different PET detectors. The image on the bottom left is the prototype system that we installed at The Ohio State University and explored, characterized that system over a period of about 3 years. The results of the performance are characterized in the paper that I'm referencing here. What's important to emphasize is that almost 2,000 different engineering design changes were made from the time of the first prototype to the final system, commercial system. This is a lengthy process. In this case, it took several years, as I already indicated, and it's not unusual for the product to undergo this type of evolution. Another example is illustrated here, is the collaborative effort between Philips and University of Pennsylvania towards the development of PenPet Explorer. PenPet Explorer is a part of the NIH grant in collaboration with UC Davis and UC Berkeley, but it uses the components of the digital photon counting Varios PET-CT system, and we have a collaborative agreement to look at the technology advancements that can be translated from a system like this to a future commercial system that Philips could develop. Here, I could not resist to present an example, even though it's not a brain scan, of fantastic results in both temporary and spatial resolution of that PET Explorer system. The initial results were published in the Journal of Nuclear Medicine, as indicated here. Past the advanced development, we look at the industrialization of the technology innovation that we develop. When I moved from academia to industry, I used to say that in academia, if something worked 1 out of 10 times, it was worth a paper. In industry, it has to work 10 out of 10 times. And the new product industrialization process is therefore quite complicated. It's a very strict governance of different gates or checkpoints where we verify that all the milestones and deliverables are completed. It's a multifunction review that includes a variety of function, not just engineering or research and development teams. The requirements management is managed by the Philips so-called V model that verifies and validates the fulfillment of these requirements at this stage. And as I just said, multiple functions are involved in that process. Not only research and development, but also project management, marketing, product management, services, applications, or clinical training, design engineers, development engineers. Regulatory plays a big role, as well as supply chain and procurement engineering that brings components of the system together to integrate in the final product. In addition to the development of the product itself, we obviously need to market that product to the different markets. Typically, it's global because of the value and the expense of the molecular imaging system. You see here a list of some of the key questions that we need to answer, and one of the key ones is the scope or the value proposition of the given product. The next 3 slides illustrate that value proposition for the various digital photon counting system, focusing on 3 elements that were identified by our medical advisory group, focusing on small lesion detectability, fast scanning, and low dose. In order to get these clinical proof points, we conduct clinical trials that validate the performance of the system, not only from a technical perspective, as in advanced development activity, but also in clinical input. We see more and more that this value proposition or value creation is shifting from technology to outcomes. And the propositions are required to obviously maintain specifications relevance, because that's a fundamental basis. But in terms of competitive advantage, the so-called outcome race is quite important. And it involves, in addition to specification and cost of the equipment, also outcomes, patient experience, and the total cost of ownership that includes the cost not only of equipment, but also servicing and for the life of the system itself. Philips is focusing on these elements by building our products based on the concept of this quadruple aim in healthcare imperative, by focusing, again, not only on specifications, but also improved patient experience, better health outcomes, lower cost of care, and improved staff experience. I'll use two examples to contrast the past and the present. In the past, one of the examples could be the system that I was involved with in my early career, the Prism 3000 gamma camera. This system was originally developed for brain imaging. Unfortunately, the use of that system was quite limited, and eventually it was repurposed for cardiac imaging. And in the past years, it disappeared from the market because the cardiac imaging was served better by variable dual head gamma cameras. And this was a little bit of technology-driven or single application-driven system that, yes, it did serve its purpose, but it did not have the long-standing position in the marketplace. To contrast that, here is how Philips markets the PET-CT system, for example, emphasizing the ambient experience or patient experience with specific environment for the patient in both imaging room and the injection room in particular, that allows to lower patient anxiety and improve patient experience during the PET procedure that between injection and imaging takes more than an hour. So I try to summarize the three main elements of product development: advanced development, the industrialization, and value proposition. I would like to end, rather than summarizing my talk, with sort of a controversial, maybe controversial ask for the audience, looking at the recent developments in neuroimaging for dementia. If we look at the graph on the left-hand side, this is the Biogen price change. Biogen is the company responsible for one of the possible treatment agents for Alzheimer's disease. And the variability of that price reflects the uncertainty about the developments. This is very difficult to invest for industry. We need to make sure that the combined efforts of industry in drug development, imaging instrumentation, and academia move us closer to finding a solution for treatment and imaging diagnosis of diseases like Alzheimer's. Thank you.